All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, everyone, for coming to the 2022 Sports Analytics Conference. My name is Rahul. I'm a master's student in business analytics at MIT Sloan. We're very excited to have a really cool panel and exhibition of chess today. So let's just get started. I'm very happy to introduce the chief chess operator and the chief chess officer of chess.com, Mr. Danny Wrench. Thanks, Danny.
It's super important when you're saying made-up titles that you get it right. It's a made-up title. That's right. We're about to get set for the most exciting sporting event known to man. That is hand and brain chess. And I kid you not, it's gonna be a lot of fun. So I'm gonna explain a little about what we're gonna do here to kick things off. After I intro our, actually I'll do that first. We're still waiting for one particular panelist to show up. But hand and brain chess is team chess, if you will. Chess, obviously known as the most individual game on the planet in many ways. You're alone in your own thoughts, but not when you play hand and brain. You have a teammate who is the brain. The brain will suggest a piece, and whether the hand likes it or not, the hand has to move that piece. So not quite like basketball where the coach has a plan and the players don't necessarily have to execute it. Yeah, even less influence. No. So we have the brain who's going to suggest a piece. The hand has to pick a piece, one of the pieces. And part of the mystery is at times in the most critical moments, the hand doesn't always know which piece maybe the brain wanted, who is typically the stronger of the two teammates, the more experienced chess player. And so that's where the fun begins and the drama is, trying to crawl into your partner's head, understand what they're trying to have you do. And then, of course, as the time ticks by, we have a DGT timer here. Both teams will have 5 minutes aside with a 3-second increment, meaning with every move, they'll get a little bit of time added back on the clock, which is kind of important because we don't ultimately want to end in a crazy scramble with pieces flying all over the place. So the chess will matter. So that's what we're about to do. You will be able to see the game along with an amazing eval bar on the left side of the board over there that'll kind of give you, depending on your level of chess, a little bit of insight in terms of what the computer currently evaluates the position at. And of course, that's important because it's going to allow us to dive into the panel, which today is very much about what computers have done to chess, what other sports can also learn from how the chess culture and community has embraced our artificially intelligent overlords, right? And how we use that information and stats and data to make better chess decisions, and then vice versa. And we're going to have a lot of fun talking about kind of machine learning, the learning models that we use in chess, and how it might relate to other sports. So that's what we're in for today. Without any further ado, I guess it's time I start with the big guy, the man in charge. He is the GM in the house. We have another GM, but he's the GM, general manager of the Philadelphia 76ers, Daryl Morey. Let's go, Daryl.
What side are we on?
Why don't you start with black?
Black.
Start with black.
Oh, are we going to flip it?
Yeah, you guys will get one game with each color, each team.
All right, and I'm definitely the hand.
Yeah, so you're the hand. You're going to sit right at the board.
Okay.
The other GM, so GM in the sports world means something a little different than the chess world. The other GM here is Grandmaster Robert Hess. Grandmaster Robert Hess is the face of chess in many ways. Wherever you watch a World Chess Championship or any sort of chess event that really matters, you'll probably see that guy doing commentary. Grandmaster Robert Hess will be the brain with his teammate Daryl Morey. Robert. I try to embarrass him wherever possible. Okay.
All right, let's do this.
We have two other. Okay, great. Ella. So we have, and I had the note in front of me. I had your intro, but Ella is a quantitative statistics, works at SIG. She is also an expert level chess player. She's going to be our expert in regards to a lot of the ways we're going to unpack.
I don't know. I think you're good.
Okay, we're good now. And Ella is going to be our.
I think it's you and I.
Is it? Is you guys being too close?
Yeah.
Classic. Too close. Okay.
You got it?
Cool.
Okay.
And as we get it, Ella is going to be the hand in the team with Jennifer Yu, U.S. Women's Champion, who just got here. So Ella, come on up.
I'm going to stay away from you. Yeah.
Ella will be the hand trying to move pieces better than Daryl Morey. And now our last panelist is U.S. Women's Champion Jennifer Yu. Jennifer, very strong chess player, just like Robert. She's going to be the brain.
She's the U.S. champion.
She's the U.S. women. I know, that's what I said. Why are you yelling at me?
More than very strong. That's
She's more than very strong.
like
She's better than
James
me.
Harden is good.
She is the U.S. Women's Champion. She will be the brain helping Ella, and Robert will be the brain helping Daryl. All right, everybody. Hey, real quick for the team here. Honor system.
Yeah.
We have the eval bar up for the fans to
Right.
have context.
They can turn that off. Can we turn
We
that
can't.
monitor
If we turn it off there, then they can't see it.
Oh.
So I need you just
All right.
focused right here. Right here. This is actually really important. We'll talk about it as we go. Especially for, oh, they can't. Okay, never mind. Great. Okay, I was wrong.
Right. Now she can see it.
But she's not going to look
She's
over
not
there.
going to look because she's a very honest
No,
person.
she's a very honest person. I'm worried when we flip the board when you're over here. But the eval bar can really provide a lot of context, right? Sometimes all you need is someone telling you which road to take, and driving is easier. So very important that strong and experienced chess players don't have an evaluation guiding them. But we're going to start.
I'm getting a glare. And the pieces are weird.
Yeah?
So I think we're.
Daryl, don't make excuses.
For those who don't know, that was a 1972
Thank you.
World Chess
All right.
Championship match
Yes,
reference
inside
between Bobby
joke.
Fischer and Spassky. This year, by the
My
way,
chair
is the 50th. Do you know that this year's the 50th anniversary of that chess match?
Yeah, because
Which
that's
is-
when I was born.
Yep. Oh, okay. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like,
All right, here we go.
That personal.
I'm going to do commentary where appropriate. I'm also just going to let them play. We're going to have fun, and the game is off.
There, I don't
White to play. Shake hands. Let's have a good game.
Wow, so
saw-
polite. I'm not shaking anybody's hand.
Wait, it is.
Oh, you're white.
You're
Yeah,
white.
but are you
Pawn. Pawn.
Okay, I'm going to announce the moves we play. So we have D4 from Ella.
We're getting to the
That's the
same thing.
Queen's pawn. How many people saw the Queen's Gambit on Netflix?
Oh, sorry. I'm like.
Wow,
but I know
not that
you're
many. I
playing.
assume everyone just didn't raise their hand.
Pawn?
Okay, sorry. Pawn to D4. Here, I might catch you up real quick.
King.
I'm going to catch you up. Make a bunch of really fast
pawn.
moves. Okay, C4. Well, this mouse. So C4, G6, knight G6,
Bishop?
knight C3, bishop G7, E4, D6. This is the King's Indian opening, starting from a queen's pawn game. Okay, F3 for white,
Knight?
castles for black,
Knight.
bishop to E3 for white,
Queen?
E3 right there, bishop E3, C5, knight G to E2.
Bishop.
I'll get more on top of it now. C takes D4. Pawn takes D4. Knight takes D4. Knight to C6. This knight here to C6. Queen to D2.
Rook.
Bishop to D7. White bishop to E2. Rook to C8.
Let's go with rook.
Castles for white. And this is where we stand in the live position. I apologize, everyone. I don't know why I'm talking more quietly as this goes on,
Sound
but
great,
it's going to keep happening.
Let's go with pawn.
Rook to E8 for black. And then rook to C1 for white. Rook A to C1. Yeah, are the brains mic'd up?
I can hear Robert, I can't hear her at all.
Okay.
Yell louder to your piece.
Don't be afraid to be loud.
Yeah.
You two were playing, I thought the phone was like that.
Oh, we're losing on time.
This is a chess match. These are the loudest sporting events on the planet. Did you guys know that? Get loud, everybody. A6 for black. So- Knight to D5 for white. Don't be afraid to announce your moves.
Okay.
Knight.
Okay. Knight takes d5. You can see that,
Pawn.
Rahul?
Knight.
Pawn on c4 takes d5. Both sides have now just gotten under 4 minutes. Just letting you know, the one element you can't really see here is the clock, so I'm going to have to be the drama meter there. 3 minutes and 59 seconds for Team Ella and Jennifer versus 3 minutes and 20 seconds for Team Daryl and Robert.
Oh, man. I don't know what he wants.
What piece did you say, Robert?
Said knight.
Robert says knight. Knight to e5.
Rook.
Bishop.
Rook takes c8. Bishop takes c8.
Well, I know you.
Rook.
Rook to c1.
Let's go with pawn.
Pawn to b5 for black.
Also pawn.
Knight.
Pawn to f4 for white. Robert has said knight.
Knight.
Knight to g4. Jennifer says knight. Ella moves
Queen.
the knight to c6. Queen to d7.
I think it's far behind on time. I suck.
Well, with that attitude,
I know.
Bishop.
you're doing great.
I am?
Yeah.
Oh, sweet. Thanks,
I
man.
just mean that in like the teammate moral support way.
I was going to say, yeah. I was like, good lying. Good job.
Jennifer has said bishop. Ella has 2 bishops, and this is a big decision. Sorry, Ella. Don't mean to add any pressure.
What are we at? 3-second increment? Is that what we're on?
It's a 3-second increment, so if it comes down to a time scramble, 3 seconds is enough time to pretty much always physically move the piece to make sure that the chess moves will decide the result, not the clock. Bishop to d4 by Ella.
Move a pawn.
Ooh, wrong bishop. Move that bishop back, Raul. And you can see the engine didn't like that, everybody, right? So Ella made the right decision.
What did you say, Paul?
It's a pawn.
Okay.
Pawn to f6 by Daryl Morey.
Pawn.
Knight.
Pawn to h3 by Ella. Knight to h6.
Knights on the rim are awesome. That's the
That,
rule, right?
that doesn't rhyme. Knights on the rim are
Pawn.
grim, dim. Pawn, suggested by Jennifer.
She only has 7 to choose from. No pressure. Ella.
Well, when you have that many pawns left,
Yeah. Just make a wrong move like me. That's my recommendation.
You can tell me we're ahead on time.
I figured you knew because you're like a top level player.
Yeah, but I
you just
can't
have
see.
an intuition. Don't you just have
we have a minute and 44 seconds for
Knight.
Team Ella and Jennifer, 2 minutes and 20 seconds for Team Daryl and Robert. Pawn to g4 from white.
Yeah, good
Pawn-
luck
knight to
figuring out an
f7.
attack as a team over there. Good luck.
Bishop.
Bishop suggested by Jennifer. Bishop to d3. Light squared bishop to d3.
Let's move a pawn.
Pawn to E5.
Pawn.
All right, flashiest move in chess, en passant.
Queen.
D5 takes E6. Queen takes E6.
Pawn.
Pawn to A3.
Bishop.
Bishop to B7. Less than a minute for Team Ella and Jennifer. A minute and 45 seconds for Team Daryl and Robert.
Pawn.
Queen.
Pawn to F5. Queen to D7.
Knight.
Knight to B4.
Knight.
Knight to E5. Bishop takes E5. Coming down to the wire with both sides now under a minute, 20 seconds versus 50 seconds for Team Daryl and Robert. Rook takes E5.
Queen.
Queen to E3.
Pawn.
Pawn to D5.
Queen. Okay, I think that just means you're.
Oh, I just, okay.
Queen to D2.
Oh, that's loud. Pawn.
Pawn takes E4.
Oh, she didn't.
Bishop to
Like we
B1.
go under a certain amount of
Yeah, it's
time.
getting loud.
Oh, what is it?
6 seconds for Team Ella and Jennifer. 30 seconds for Daryl and Robert. Pawn to E3.
King.
Queen to E1.
Queen.
King to... No. Queen to E7. Knight to D3.
Rook.
Rook to E4. Both sides are under 10 seconds.
Pawn.
Bishop to A2. Bishop to B1. Oh, sorry. Rook C1. It was Rook C1.
Rook.
Oh, I guess
Something.
Queen.
Rook.
Bishop.
We've lost the thread.
King.
Okay.
Rook.
We'll catch up and show you the ending. Don't you worry.
Bishop.
The queen has been lost. The queen has been lost. The game is over.
Time scale.
Team Ella Papanek and Jennifer
Yeah, I
Yu
know,
take
I
it.
know.
Game 1.
I knew that when I
So
played
what is
Bishop
the
E3,
below
I
a
didn't,
certain
that wasn't
time
what you were
what?
wanting me to do,
Yeah.
right?
So
I was like, I
when
can't
the
think of a
clock
move and I know I'm supposed to
I'm
say
afraid to
prediction.
get so close. When the clock is below 10 seconds,
You're doing great, though.
when the clock was
Oh,
below
you
10
put like- you
seconds
put
is
like
when
a
it was
ball.
beeping.
Yeah, you play like a ball.
The final position we will show quickly. Robert, I might need you to help us enter how these game ended because
He should said black bishop.
something went wrong. Robert's a grandmaster. He remembers every chess game he ever plays. I'm not kidding.
That's
so he's going to
true.
quickly back us up. Lost on time. You see the flag. We're going to reset it for the next game.
So
We're
I just had a win right here, right?
Yeah.
yeah. Team Daryl and Robert will get the white pieces in the next game.
Don't get
that was
me
a
in time,
that was a
though.
great game.
You can't see the board?
No, but it got so fast, it's really hard.
Yeah, Lance, I thought we had a camera on the board.
Take the board off the screen.
What?
We were told to take the live board off the screen.
Why? No.
If there's any way to see the board, we can, or the clock.
Well,
If
not
not,
the-
that goes under the notes for next year.
We can just say our moves when we do
You
that.
can't do a live shot of the board?
Live shot, but only one side can see it.
That's okay, yeah. Because they could just move. Yeah. Oh my God. Does it just win on the spot? No, you still have here.
No, there was a.
There was still a queen. It was
And then,
so, yeah.
Oh, yeah. It was
and then he,
over.
yeah.
Oh, I
He
had
moves
it was
bishop.
one. It was one.
He moved this bishop.
We're gonna
this
switch
C6.
sides?
I just ran out of
Over
time.
here.
Yeah, he lost on time, but I wanted with the other bishop.
Yeah, that was good, right? Yeah,
Not
yeah.
about the result.
It's about the process.
It's about the process.
We trust the process.
We all believe in the
Yes,
process.
Yes.
So Rook takes e5.
Oh, I didn't know. So
Oh,
I
yeah.
thought
I was like waiting.
I
now.
couldn't
It's
say
like,
I was
pawn.
focused more on time
Yep.
because
also
I
wanted to
thought
play
she
knight
always had to
g5
call the
instead of knight
piece
e5.
off.
Yeah.
So one of the things that
Both
happened
sides
here,
played
obviously, everyone was very focused on one very big dramatic moment.
What did I
Robert,
mess up?
Robert, I have to come to you. Did you see the Botez Gambit that you played?
The bishop d3 was
The
also
boat
fine.
has
Like, I think
gambit,
it
yeah.
When
was
you
like-
said pawn on e3 and the queen on d7 was hanging.
Just
Queen was not on
aggressive.
d7.
I'll try to be faster this
It wasn't.
No. No.
Oh. Okay. Well, then we had already lost the thread. Then.
Yeah.
Okay. That was an exciting moment for all of us.
I take plenty of blame in my life. This is not one I'm gonna go down for.
This position was a very tense one, obviously, until the time scramble occurred. And we're gonna try to be as closely following the relay this time. I won't let it get far behind. That's on me, not Raul here. That was
Danny, are
on
we doing
me.
3 minute or 5 minute?
This is
It's
3
5
now.
minutes plus 3 seconds. Oh, it reset itself. Okay, 1 second.
Whatever. Well, let's
I'm
do
gonna
3
quickly
minute.
fix the clock. No, we got time. We should give you guys more time. I'm gonna quickly fix the
We want
clock.
to see Daryl scramble.
I built this time advantage on purpose.
Yeah, no,
and then
you played
but
well.
then she's allowed to just play.
Yeah, no, but you were still playing well until
Okay.
until the last move of the game. You were
Literally,
playing-
that was good.
When
Yeah.
you lost on time and you moved the other bishop, which is
What I just forgot I had it.
even when you went rook takes knight like that.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
And I
that's
know it was
good.
an exchange deck. Yeah, I could
Yeah,
tell.
you got the two. You were great.
Yeah.
You're just setting it up for a dramatic, game 3.
Oh yes.
Don't do it yet. In a second, we'll play.
Okay.
I think we're ready.
How can you not recognize these
Wow, look at this. What?
Well, these pieces are weird. Yeah.
This looks like it's the caramel.
So
we have the
there
board?
are there
Can
are
you
some
see the
different.
board now?
That was mixed by the students in process.
This looks great. Looks great. Let's
GGT boards.
let's go
I have
go
a
with how
DGT
awesome
board.
let's go with how awesome this is. Everyone can see the clock. Everyone, if you combine the clock with the real-time position over there, you should have a little bit of a better feel for the drama. So
Your neck
no,
might hurt, but
no,
you'll
no
know
bad
what's going
feelings.
on.
No bad. That's a good thing. Back and forth in the time scramble. So
tennis.
real quick, I want to clarify something because I had a great question here on the rules. There are some different
this is winning
ethical
on the
rules
spot,
when it
the
comes to
bishop
hand
there.
and brain.
I should tell you queen though.
Hey, let's decide real quick, guys.
Without it, no,
Real quick.
it's my bad.
So in the last 10 seconds, the hand can just move without
Yeah.
the brain.
Yeah,
okay?
but that's you can't add that rule at the end.
Well, I'm asking if it's okay. It was a question from the crowd, and I'm going to clarify that there are different rules to this, but it's house rules. There are different
Okay.
versions of this.
Okay.
And this is kind of your house.
I think if the increment is sufficiently high, then we can rely on the brain,
brain.
indefinitely.
Okay.
So is
I
the
appreciate
increment
that data.
it's not
And,
sufficient.
No, what do we decide? Like
so-
5 seconds?
Yeah, they can just
would
go
make
at it.
But
Okay. I will make the call then, just because
What
we're
do we-
here.
what do
I
we
actually
do?
do think it's better entertainment if under 10
doing the
seconds the hand is allowed to move. So hand doesn't have to wait for the cue
alright,
from the brain
fine.
under 10 seconds.
So see,
By the
she
way,
can just
that
get it
doesn't
to
mean
the
the
end.
brain can't help.
Yeah, no, I
Right,
got
but the
you.
hand does not have to. Real rules of hand and brain actually vary. We've done many events like
That's a
this,
big
and there
extra.
are times where even under a minute, the hand is allowed to take over. So this is not anything out of the norm, but it's going to allow the game to be a little more exciting and not get so crazy
So I could look at it later?
by the end.
They lost the game.
Most of it.
Well, you'll have it
Yeah. Okay.
because
But
you know everything.
Yeah. No, I do remember.
Daryl, are you ready this time?
I'm ready.
Wait.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it. Game 2.
Pawn. Yeah.
Pawn,
Sorry.
Knight.
Knight.
D4, D5,
Pawn. Yeah, I know.
Pawn.
Knight F3,
Bishop.
Knight to F6,
Pawn.
Knight F6,
King.
copying white,
Don't do
Knight
it.
F6,
Bishop.
pawn to E3 for white,
Knight.
pawn to E6 for black,
Pawn.
bishop to D3 for white,
Ready. All right. Fine.
bishop to
I know you.
D3 for white,
Actually, I
bishop to
think that much
D6 for
better.
black, copy chess, bishop D6,
Knight.
castles for white, castles for black, knight B to D2 for white, white knight on B to D2, black pawn to C6,
Okay. Knight.
E4.
white pawn to E4,
Bishop.
D takes E4, pawn takes E4, white knight takes E4,
She's like,
Black
no one
knight
plays
takes
these
E4.
lines anymore.
white
Jennifer's
bishop
like,
takes
what is this
E4,
line?
and this is the live position where we stand. Knight to D7,
So the pawn.
Knight.
Bishop.
pawn to C3,
Pawn.
knight to F6, knight to F6, bishop to C2, black pawn to C5,
Pawn.
You feel that? That's chest tension right there.
Pawn.
Knight to, pawn to H3. I'm sorry. I was physically blocked in my field of vision. Pawn to B6.
Queen.
Sure.
Queen to D3.
Pawn.
We had a minute edge, but it eroded.
Things happen.
I think you weren't saying the pieces fast enough.
You can't focus on the past.
Yeah. Blaming New Yorker for not talking quickly enough. Yeah.
Pawn to H6.
Knight.
Knight to H2.
Okay.
Got to add drama where you can.
Well, when do you say Bob is your uncle? When is that appropriate?
Bishop.
It's always appropriate. Bishop to B7.
Knight.
Knight to G4.
Knight.
Knight to E4.
Robert is like tactics.
That's a brain that's working right there.
He's just trying to see if I can figure out his tactics.
Let's go with pawn.
Pawn from the brain.
All right. Let's do it.
Pawn to F3.
That was the more simple way. Oh, yeah. Oh, of course, pawn.
Pawn.
Pawn suggestion from Jennifer. Pawn to F5.
Pawn.
It's about to get wild, people.
Eliminating my scope.
Pawn takes knight.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Bishop.
Bishop takes E4.
Oh, that's annoying. I feel like I fucked that up.
You always feel that way. Knight.
Robert has suggested knight. A bold suggestion.
Okay, I see it. Oh, oh that almost has to be it. Yeah, I think that's required.
Knight takes H6 with check. 2 minutes roughly for each side.
Queen.
Pawn takes knight.
Oh, jeez.
Queen to C4. 1 minute and 27 seconds for Team Maury. 1 minute and 44 seconds for Team Papanik. Bishop takes C2.
Queen.
Queen takes E6 with check.
Rook.
Rook to F7.
Queen.
Queen takes E6. Rook to F7. The suspense. Queen takes H6.
Queen.
A minute and 2 seconds for Daryl. A minute and 10 seconds for Ella.
Queen.
Queen to F6. Queen to D2. Bishop to E4.
for Robert. Trying to save this.
30 seconds for Team Daryl.
Rook.
A minute for Team Ella. Rook to f4.
Bishop.
Queen.
Bishop takes rook. Queen takes bishop.
Pawn.
Pawn takes d4.
Bishop.
Rook.
Pawn.
Rook to g7. Sorry, bishop to d2. Sorry, I thought it was on the board. Bishop d2 for white. Bishop d2 for white. Rook to g7 for black. Pawn to g4. Three seconds for Team
3
Daryl.
seconds?
20 seconds for Team Ella.
Good thing I had
It's
that
not
on
over.
those.
Queen to h4,
Yeah.
king to h2.
There you go, Daryl. That's right. Speed up.
Rook takes g4.
Such a good move. Rook.
Oh.
Oh,
Rook to g1 for white.
No, he flies.
I wasn't going to call it. Players have to call it.
Only chance, though.
And that is our game two. Everyone, let's give him a big round of applause for the
Sacrifice
hand
our
and brain
bishop.
match. 2 games.
When you went queen here, you gave away our bishop.
Two,
I know.
two
move
games
backwards.
won by
What?
Team
Just
Ella
move backwards.
Papanek and Team
Yeah,
Jennifer
same.
Yu. Obviously,
You
don't go
didn't
into it. We're
go
going to unpack everything that just happened, talk about some of the strategies and critical moments before we dive into our panel.
No. How'd you get so wild?
We can.
I don't know.
Usually you're so, you know.
I know. I was trying to channel you.
You,
I
you,
Yeah,
felt
that
like it
was
was
bad,
a private
yeah.
dynamic.
You
They
don't
didn't even
understand
want
me.
everyone else hearing.
What's that?
you just don't understand me, I guess.
No.
You guys understand each other in so many ways.
What's that? Oh, yeah. It's my
Yeah.
coach's fault.
That's true.
That's why I teach our players blame others.
Oh,
It was a great game. Yeah.
So we
Um,
had. Yeah, I wasn't on the same.
You want to do that? I'll kind of show them the critical
Didn't we
moment
have
while we
a-
set that up. So if everyone wants to turn their attention to the right screen, we're going to back up to the
Yeah,
critical
get
moment.
to-
It was a fantastic London. Frankly, Daryl, this was, this knight suggestion from Robert, the relocation
Yeah.
to G4, this was brilliant. The critical
Right.
idea, everybody, is white is actually threatening checkmate on the
Yeah.
H7 square.
Right.
And so removing this knight is actually a brilliant point. Sometimes when we're watching
I
as
got that
fans,
right. That's what you wanted, right?
and we see the engine is saying 50-50, we don't appreciate how critical the moment is. For example, it may be 50-50, but a single mistake and the game is over.
Right.
And so I just dropped the mouse. And so,
drop the mic next.
not quite the mic. And so Jennifer makes obviously a bold suggestion, but she trusts her teammate when she says knight. She knows that Ella's going to see the checkmate. So rather than take the knight and get mated, she plays the only knight move that survives, which is knight e4. This was a hugely critical moment.
Yeah.
Pawn suggestions back and forth, a great suggestion. You want to get that pony out of the way for Bob's your uncle. There you go, Daryl on h7.
There you go.
But Ella says no
Now
with,
that was the
with
right
f5.
move.
Yeah.
This moment is so great because the 50-50 balance by the engine really doesn't reflect
So
the
you
drama
wanted to
as
go
we
to
saw
back to
that
H2 here
a single mistake and it's over.
or F3.
No, this is all good.
This was all good. This is what Robert wanted, and this was the big moment. Knight was the right find with knight takes h6. In this position, Robert wanted a different queen move than what Daryl found. Robert, tell him what it was.
Yeah, just move the queen to e2.
Yep.
Just keep your bishop defended because their king isn't worse e2 instead of d2.
Okay,
but somebody.
yeah,
I assume we still had something, but we were just we didn't have it.
either one actually,
It's
and
a fight. Yeah.
in this position, when black takes, white can take back, and the long-term evaluation is still very balanced, but black's king is totally open, right, because of that knight check. So this would have been a very tricky position for Ella and Jennifer to balance if queen e2 had been played. I think Daryl actually goes for the kill
I
here.
oh, wait, I'm
Yeah,
still
but
alive.
unfortunately, he was killing me. So.
Yeah.
And then should
But I think we got to give credit where credit's due.
No,
It was the defense by Jennifer and Ella because Jennifer suggests queen, And really, this is the key move
That's
to bring
the
the
right
queen to
move,
protect the
yeah.
king. If any other queen move is made, just to show, if something random is made, I mean, white is bringing pieces into this attack. The rooks are coming over, and you can see that there's going to be a lot of potential for black to go wrong. But Ella and Jennifer were totally in sync, especially given that I think they just met like 20 minutes ago, right? So that was awesome to see. Sometimes the longer you're with
I
a
need to
partner,
go to
Robert, it
E3
doesn't mean
there,
that you
right?
understand each other any better.
But we're already.
We're already sunk, but I go E3, then she can't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, we're just in trouble. Can we not look at this anymore?
Okay, and we're done. Okay, so we're going to set up for the panel here, everybody, and talk a little bit about some of the dynamics between the
it felt like
coach,
there
if
was
you will,
more
and
there,
the
there
player,
wasn't, yeah.
and how that's kind of an interesting thing that went down when you have.
I'm used to
We'll talk
pressing
about
those
it.
positions.
We're going to let Daryl and Robert talk here.
Then she
'cause-
found F. Oh, sorry.
Well, I did consider H5 briefly, and then I was like, wait, no.
Okay, I'll just bring it over.
She found F5, and I was like, yeah.
No,
Oh
in the
well.
very beginning, I was trying to get you to play H6. Like,
Yeah, 'cause
six times,
you're
and
all-
everyone
yeah.
says, "Honk,
Yeah,
honk,
yeah.
honk."
I know. I know.
I don't need to be afraid to bring my mic close now, I hope.
I actually. Where should we do?
Where do
this?
you want me?
Over here. Yeah. over
I
Side?
should have
Okay.
switched the order. When I said knight, I should have said queen first.
No. Well, he might have, but then I messed it up. So that's good.
You did great.
Are we good here? Okay.
We had it going. No, we
You
wanted.
did great.
So,
You did great. The first game.
before we dive into our awesome set of topics and let each of these experts weigh in on what we're here going to have a lot of fun talking about for the next hour, we'll talk a little bit about what we just saw in the hand and brain, because even in the face of being shamed by my friends, I told Daryl and Robert last night. What did I tell you guys?
They were the favorite.
They
And
were the favorite.
Robert,
yeah.
I'm going to let you talk about the dynamic of coach and player and why you and I have seen this a lot in terms of the balance between the brain and the hand, because Robert is the strongest chess player in the room. He's one of the strongest chess players in the world, right? Daryl is an amazing chess player, and they actually are working together on a regular basis, so they know each other. But we talked about the balance of when it actually comes time to making some of the critical time pressure moments, the more experienced hand tend to be the favorite. But Robert, tell us a little bit about what you think happened there.
I mean, I think you summed it up pretty well. that-
Daryl's not listening.
No, I think there was a moment where Daryl wanted to keep going for the attack.
Right.
And so he gave up a piece in order to do that. And that works in many different circumstances. But in the game that we just saw, Jennifer and Ella were able to react perfectly.
Right.
So instead of retreating, they were just able to take our pieces, then defend, and we were left without enough firepower to attack.
Right. And there's no version of trying to talk about that, not trying to disparage, but we know it's hard, right, in fast time controls to make intuitive decisions based on translating your teammate. But Ella, how confident were you as the hand as Jennifer's suggestions were coming in?
I mean, I think it depends what piece you're hearing. If you hear pawn, you're not going to be as confident because there are just naturally more options.
Right.
But in situations where there's 3 candidate moves and all of them are different pieces, you can be almost certain.
Right. Daryl, how would you equate this analogy to, I don't know what to do about my mic, by the way, guys. I'm just going to keep talking here.
You're
Hopefully
good.
it
Oh, is it
does.
ringing?
I keep hearing it.
Oh.
Okay. How would you equate it to the analogy of you have a coach on the sidelines whose job is to set forth vision and strategy to a degree, but ultimately the players on the court, on the field, with the power to execute the vision or not, right, are the ones who are probably really paying the bills. So no matter what happens, it's not the GM's fault. That's what we're here to say, people.
I think actually it's pretty similar in that.
Yeah.
Like Coach Rivers or the coaches I've worked with before, they have like in their head like the optimal play, and even as someone who observes like you and Robert as high level players and Jennifer, you sort of can see how you want it to go, and then you're like, no. So that happens quite a bit.
Do you ever have that as I mean, no, you're not the coach, but you're the
Yeah.
GM. Do you ever look at it and say, hey, you're driving with a lot of data and analytics, trying to arm your team with information on what they should be doing, even if sometimes executing it's a struggle?
Yeah, I was just talking to Mitch Lasky, who's on a couple panels, and he owns LAFC, and we were bonding over the following type thing. So there's a player on his team that has a very strong left foot, and every coach, he's certain when they play their team, tells their guys, shade left, don't give him an open space, even 40 yards out for his left foot, and then they will give it up, right? And he knows the other coach has total. This is the same with, like, say, Danny Green, who's an older player. He's made his living on one type of play, which is, like, basically sprinting to the corner, trying to get behind the vision of the defender, and then making an open corner three, which, as we know, is super efficient. And I'll watch games and say, I know the other coach is about to call a timeout and yell at everybody. So I think it actually is pretty analogous. You know, especially like Ella said, when there's a pawn move called, I think, you know, they're just as nervous as we are. They're like, no, did you want me to take that pawn on C5?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought so. Why?
Jennifer, as the brain there, were you trying to choose plans that you felt would be easily understood by Ella? Do you feel like that wasn't necessary and you guys were just in simpatico? But how did it go for you, feeling like the pressure to suggest a move that you knew she would find?
Yeah, like, so because of the special circumstance of hand and brain, it's not like whatever I want to plan is going to happen, since there is like the other variable of what is she thinking. So I did try to keep that in mind. Like, there was like some miscommunication in some parts, or I'd be like, I really want a certain move and we're just not getting it. But also I think she did a really great job. Like, there were some key moments in both of the games, and every single time we were like right in sync. Like we showed it on the board in the last game with Queen F6, trying to defend everything. Like, that was just all perfect. It was just really well done.
F5, which was
Yeah, F5, Queen F6, like that sequence was just
Yep.
like, so like not all my suggestions are perfect either.
Yep.
So I think we did like a great job working
Yep.
together for it.
Yep, 2-0. Well, last question, and we'll wrap up on this. The hand and brain, Robert, you've been the brain in more hand and brain big moments than I think a lot of people. He won a championship online this year with a partner who is a very well-known streamer. How do you equate it as the coach's responsibility to give a vision that the players are confident to execute? How much responsibility do you take in giving your partner something that you know they can find, and how do you approach that?
Yeah, it's all on me.
Yeah, I was just about to say that's the right thing to say right now. This is your fault, not Daryl's.
It generally is, because you need to, as Jennifer was suggesting, you need to get into the brain of your hand. It sounds really weird when I just say that out loud. But like you need to be able to understand what, like in this case, what Daryl was thinking, what he wants to do. And I have worked with Daryl, so I know his tendencies. But that actually, I think, was counterproductive here, because he just told me after the game, he's like, I thought you wanted to do this thing, whereas I was trying to do something that I know is in his general framework. And now he's like, no, I'm trying to cater my chess right now to you. And then it sort of backfired.
There's a metaphor for healthy relationships in here somewhere about communication and
Just
assuming
selflessness.
what
Selflessness all
selflessness. Oh, it's just you guys are
over selfless. Is bad.
over selfless is
true.
bad in a relationship. Communicate. Never mind. Okay. All right. Well, that was a lot of fun. I hope that everyone who was here for the whole match and enjoyed it. And Robert and I talk about the different strategies of this stuff all the time. It's awesome to have this experience, and maybe it'll be something we do again at a future panel. But we're gonna shift gears a little bit to talk overall and let all of our experts weigh in on an awesome topic that we're excited to get into, which is taken from the framework of what we see in the chess world on a regular basis as it relates to breakthroughs in technology. Chess has always kind of been tied to the first computers were developed and built to play chess. And everyone remembers, even if you don't know his name, the guy who played the computers in the 90s. Oh, it was Kasparov and IBM. And there's always been a link between technological and you could say data breakthroughs and then them coming back to the top chess players and how they deal with that information, how they change their approach. And as we see, and obviously we know we're at the sports, Sloan Analytics Conference here, and a lot of topics relating to how stats and data are driving analytically based decisions in real time. And so we're going to talk about chess. So we're going to start on the end here with Ella Papanek. Again, she's a quantitative analyst for SIG. She knows a lot about this topic, and what we wanted to start with was just maybe set the groundwork for everyone on how much we see data and analytics driving decisions in chess, and what you do in your role to kind of be looking at it. You have a panel following this, kind of talking about this topic and trying to unpack some of the real-time probabilities and things like that. So where you sit, how much do you see data driving chess going forward?
Yeah, I think it's huge for players from a strategic perspective. I would say over recent years, chess computers have quickly surpassed anything that humans could possibly do. So right now the world's best chess computers are significantly better than the world's best chess players. And a lot of people believe that is due to improvements in like computation power, but a lot of it is actually due to the way that chess computers are now approaching the game. And so I think it's important for human chess players not to try to compare themselves to computers and learn to play like computers, but to see what kinds of information they can extract from the way that computers play, and understanding sort of the trade-offs that computers are considering to shape their strategic approach to the game.
I love that. It's deep. And I want to say, again, let's talk about, you said the difference is the way computers are now approaching it. Is that the machine learning approach, the neural net, where we're no longer telling computers what we think, we're letting them just figure it out on their own?
Yeah, so I guess earlier chess computers were done just by recursively evaluating a very deep decision tree that was deeper than anything a human could see. But the machine learning approach has allowed computers to sort of come up with their own theories and strategies, types of positions that they like to play that are often very different from like the way a human would assess a position.
And so moving from the science to the chess part of that, Robert, we've talked about the fact that...
I was just going to add.
Yeah.
The decision tree, I think people get, it's like you move here, you move here. But what she's saying is the more modern ones, they basically develop their decision on where to move by playing themselves, like war games, tic-tac-toe style,
Right.
billions and billions of times over
Shout out
and
to
over.
Matthew Broderick, by the way. Yeah.
Is he here?
I don't know.
Okay.
War Games reference.
And then they put a probability on winning in these end positions. So it's a decision tree, but it's built by playing itself over and over and over, basically. Yeah.
No, it's great explaining the science there. And what we were talking about is initially, as computers started affecting the way top chess players had to approach the game because they were just unlocking that they were better than humans, right? That actually led to maybe a different type of style that we saw for chess players, a generation that had to learn to deal with computers versus a generation that grew up with it. So, Robert, talk a little bit about what the chess world initially did as computers burst onto the scene and were better than everybody versus what the generation of chess players looks like now.
Well, I mean, there's kind of rejecting it and embracing it. And I think initially, chess players didn't want to admit that engines were better, but of course you can't argue with it. And chess is a very objective game. But I think nowadays, every prodigious talent you see, whether it's Magnus Carlsen and everyone who comes after him, has lived their entire chess life with the engine. And there's no way to avoid it. I mean, there's a way to avoid the preparation that happens with the engine, but you still need the engine to help you avoid the engine, if that makes sense.
Well, and speaking of a player who, from a generation and a U.S. champion, that you don't remember a time, I guess, where engines weren't telling you that they knew the answer, right? And as someone who's prepared chess at the highest level and then effectively used computers in that way, talk a little bit about that. How have you approached letting the engines, like Ella said, give you information, even though you maybe can't execute as well as they would, but they give you information on how to approach your preparation?
So I guess I'm kind of the player that Robert was kind of mentioning a little bit, which was like I'm not the person that only uses engines, but I do definitely use them. Like when I prepare, it's unavoidable. You just have to. I think, or you don't have to, but it saves a lot of time. Like, what I usually do is like whenever I want to analyze or go over one of my games, I always put in an engine. They say it's best to like put some time and thought into it without the engine, which is how I guess they always did it. But it's just so tempting now that you put an engine in and it automatically tells you what moves are wrong, where you can improve, and you can look into that, and then from there you can get even more possibilities and more branches to go down. Actually, something I wanted to mention was that as a chess player, one of the first questions that people ask me. Well, first they asked me if I've seen the Queen's Gambit. First they asked me that, but then they
Have you seen it?
Have I seen? Of course.
You haven't seen the Queen's Gambit?
No, I can't. If I don't, like that's kind of like I
That's
can't
awesome.
call myself a chess player. If I haven't. And then the second question is like, how far can I like calculate in advance? Like you always get asked that question, and the thing is, you can't really answer that because it's not really how far you see; it's how many like variations, like how many possibilities. Because after each move, you get like it's like a branch. You get 3 other moves that's possible that your opponent can play, and in those moves, you have your own candidate moves, and it branches out. So I guess like with a computer, it also helps you narrow down which ones you should focus on.
Is it fair to say then that the machines are now, machine learning models are approaching chess more like humans, based on how Darryl, can I call you David?
Sure.
David described the tree of analysis. Robert, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, there's so much that goes into it, as Jennifer was just scratching the surface with, about how you prepare, right? Like chess, you have a database of your opponent's games, so you can look through hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of games that they played. But at the highest levels, chess players, they shift all the time. Like you may think that they're going to play something that they've played 200 times, and they play something different against you on that day because they feel like it, or because they know that's what you're likely preparing for. So the game behind the game is really fascinating. And what Jennifer was saying, like that instant feedback that you get with the engine, it's great because it does narrow down your choices, but it will never tell you the why, at least not as they currently exist. So you get the what, which is great, but it doesn't actually help you improve unless you're diving deep. So top players will have the engine say, spout out a number, this is how good the position is for you, but then they want to play. And as I've worked with some of the absolute best players in the world, you just have the position, go to the chessboard, start playing speed chess in those positions so they can get a feel for it rather than just being told that it's a certain way.
It's funny, when engines first jumped on the scene, it almost made players more risk adverse because suddenly there was this answer they were afraid to get wrong. Now with the creative way we see machine learning neural nets approaching chess, it's almost like modern chess players are a little more embracing of the risk. What kind of parallels could you draw to sports in terms of...
Why, are you saying chess is not a sport?
That's not what I said, although that is a debate. That's next year's
It was
panel.
implied in your question.
I'll let Robert answer that later. But as we see these breakthroughs happen, and you see, the NBA embrace sabermetrics, right? Let alone we're not, the Bill James sabermetrics and the NBA, and everything is advanced analytics telling you and informing your decisions. There's a balance between, as I said, the previous generation maybe became more risk adverse, more overwhelmed by it, versus a generation that grows up and learns how to almost think like the computers. What kind of parallels could you draw to traditional sports?
Yeah, basketball.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. Yeah, I think for sure, like, I always think of as chess as always the very farthest out front, where all the things are first going to happen and then other sports catch up. It was the first chess computers, and now there are computers that analyze using vision and machine learning, pick and rolls, and what are the optimal angles to set them, and what have been the successful ways to play. And then obviously the simple stuff like, where are the optimal places to shoot on the floor, three-pointers, things like that. And then the game theory of knowing where someone else is going to shoot comes up similar to chess, and that when someone plays someone in chess and they're playing quickly, the other person usually can be fairly confident they're in their preparation for you, and that creates its own set of dynamics. And similar here, if the other side knows exactly what we're going to do all the time, that gives them a slight edge. Although in basketball, a lot of the optimal ways to play are so optimal, even if your opponent knows what's coming, which is one.
I was going to ask that then, because I wanted to go back to Jennifer's point and let you respond to the fact that in chess, the engines are always right and there's no debate. Your ability to understand
that's not true. You guys keep saying that, but it's not true.
Well, okay, let's say on a much less debatable level. On a much less debatable. Go ahead, Robert.
If you play the optimal move in chess in a winning position, you will always win.
No,
right.
but
If you do the optimal
there's
thing.
no known optimal move in the first 5 moves.
in
That's
the
true,
first.
but
Yeah.
Once we get past a certain
Once
point.
okay.
But if you do the optimal thing in basketball, it doesn't mean it's always going to work out, right?
Correct.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
lack
think
of
that's-
chance in
because
chess.
there's a
Complete
probability
information.
outcome.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is it an advantage for chess players or a disadvantage? And that's kind of what I'm wondering is humans are trying to play like computers because there's the advantage of knowing the answer, yet it's more impossible to live up to a perfect chess game. I would argue, I guess, to play like a computer, and you can set an optimal path. There's more chance in basketball.
Yeah, I think having some chance in sport is definitely optimal for all the things that people optimize on generally, which is, optimizing revenue and fans and drama. I think you definitely want some probability of the outcome, which is why I like curling. So curling gets compared to chess, and we had curling here a few years ago, and I think of curling as chess if most of the time you're like, I'm going to move my knight here, but then you roll a die, and if you roll a 1, your pawn moves instead. Basically, it's one of the only deterministic games, meaning chess, where it's actually still interesting. Like having a fully deterministic game is almost always a negative for viewers. It's just chess is so rich and so many combinations of moves that are possible that it's still interesting, even though it's deterministic, which I think is
I want to come back to that at some point with Robert to respond to the how you keep a game that has so many defined outcomes very interesting and edutaining, if you will. But before I want to go back to Ella because
all the deterministic games are almost gone.
Right.
I mean, like checkers, not interesting. Connect Four, not interesting. Tic-tac-toe, not interesting. These are deterministic games that have just been solved.
Yep.
Chess just happens not to be solved. But I think chess would have an advantage if somehow some probability element was added to it. That's why people love poker. Poker has both the strategy and there's a dynamic element of randomness that helps it.
Yeah, well, that's something I think about a lot is, let's say you have a position and you see a move that all the continuations are good for you except for one that seems really difficult to find. You could gamble on whether or not your opponent will see that. And I think that's somewhat looked down upon from like the chess purist community. Like you should be doing the best move at any point in time that you have available, but that's not equivalent to maximizing win probability.
Yeah, I'll ask you, you guys are both top players. Would you ever play a move that there's a continuation you don't think they'll find, but in the 1 in 30 chance they find it, you're in trouble? Or will you always play a branch that will lead to a full?
Well, I think it's really dependent on the situation and also who you're playing. Like for example, if you know that your opponent, there's someone, like if you're really aggressive against, they just retreat. They don't like fight back as much. Then you might be able to get away with some things like that when you do something risky and you're like, oh, maybe their one continuation is they have some counterattack that's very like hard to determine like what the outcome is, but most likely they're just not going to play it, they're just going to retreat. So if you know who your opponent is, you can play kind of like these mind games. And I've done some, like I bluffed in a lot of games before. Sometimes I get away with it. It's just all dependent on the situation. Also, there's a factor of time, and like just how easy is it to play the position. Like we were talking kind of about how like chess is deterministic because of like the engine says like what the best move is, but something that like I see a lot in like openings and things is you might get an engine telling you this is like the best sequence because at this point maybe the game is completely equalized. But it doesn't tell you that like for in order to maintain that position you might need to play 10 perfect moves in a row. And you know humans aren't perfect, so there's a pretty good chance that you're not going to play that perfect move and maybe your opponent's going to take advantage of it. Or it might tell you that you have a forced win here, but that also means that you have to find some really strange like unhuman-like approach to get there. So I don't think like what the engine says is like determines exactly what the game is going to go towards.
Is that kind of like when the data says to shoot the 3, but they keep driving just because the engine says it? Doesn't mean it's always the right call. Ella, you work in obviously you were just talking about the probability models that you're kind of building with chess, but you also work in football, right, with similar things. And one of the things Jennifer said made me think of that because the particular risk she might take being based on the matchup of who she's playing, right? That person's style, that person's personality, maybe that person's time available on the clock, you might make that decision. What kind of correlations can you draw there between the matchup probabilities you work on in football versus the probability models you work on in chess? And go ahead.
Yeah, so I think matchup factors are huge in football. Advantages for teams are directly related to the weaknesses on the other team. So if you have a team that has a really great wide receiver core, they would prefer to play a team whose primary weakness is their secondary rather than like, you know, their tight ends or something. Or if you have a team that has a really good pass rush, they want to play teams with weak offensive line. And so similarly in chess, if you're a really strong tactical player and you know that that's your primary advantage over your opponent, maybe your opponent struggles with calculation or seeing tactics, then you want to force the game in a tactical direction. You want to try and add as much tactical complexity to the position as you can. And tactical versus positional is only one of those kind of contrasts, but there are plenty of other like closed positions versus open positions. Even if you are uncomfortable playing closed positions, which many chess players are, if you believe that you have edge over your opponent in those kinds of positions, then you would want to force the game in that direction. It
makes a ton of sense. And Robert, that makes me want to throw to you in terms of obviously you played chess super high level, you've coached chess at a super high level. How much do you think about that, not just as a player, but as a coach, right? In terms of trying to put someone in a position to execute against a style because you know that your player is great in the end game and you don't feel the other person is comfortable with queens off the board, to make a really simple analogy. How much have you thought about that in both your prep as a coach and a player?
Think about it a ton. And I think that it's not quantified in a great way in chess, and it can be used much more effectively. But I will say that, I will play a different first move in a different day. It's a different first move, depending on how I feel my opponent will respond and what their preferences are. So it's a huge part of chess. And also coaching, and you work, working with some, great players. Sometimes you
one of them is on the stage.
Yeah. But well, so you're leaving out who?
Well, tell the story with Jennifer, where the, go ahead.
Yeah, I coached the U.S. women's national team, and Jennifer did amazingly well. She won a medal in 2018. So, I figured.
What is winning a medal for chess?
Like top three,
It was 8.5 out of 11, or 8.
Yeah.
It was a huge score.
Yeah.
In an international event.
But what I was going to say about your preparation, and like, for example, Fabiano Caruana, who's one of the top, he played for the 2018 World Championship. What he said very publicly during our commentary for his last World Championship is that sometimes you look for lines that don't show up in the engine, speaking of playing suboptimally, because the top players, they're trying to find the best possible moves, objectively. But that may not be the best possible situation over the board. So if you can find a very interesting, maybe it's a tactical game, maybe it's one where there are a lot of pitfalls that are easy to, stumble into, that could be a more optimal strategy than playing the optimal move every single time. And that is very relevant at the highest levels. And it's something that players think about all the time. Is like, maybe I will make a worse move on move 7 according to the computers, but it's a better chance for me to do well in this game.
I saw you nodding along, Jennifer. You want to add to that? And that, have you ever chosen preparation that was specifically dubious, but because you knew you were getting your opponent out of their preparation, out of their comfort zone, so to speak?
Well, I guess I'm the right person to answer that because I've played many dubious openings over my lifetime.
Is it because of your coach? Is it because bad
Well,
openings?
actually, my coaches are one that gave me good lines, but at some point, including Robert.
That was your
at that
chance to throw him under the
tournament.
bus.
But,
Feel free.
Yeah. But I actually had good results in those games. So, yes, but that is like something that you see pretty often, especially with a lot of younger kids, I think, where they spend a lot of time on the engine and they don't necessarily put in the best moves, just like strange moves that that isn't that popular or mainstream, and then they go really in depth, so they have a lot of preparation in this obscure kind of place. And it's like if you've never seen something like that before, it's like, how do you deal with it? You just have to use your own brain against it, but you're playing against someone who checked it with a computer that's like much better than the best player in the world. So it's like, am I playing a person or am I playing a computer? So then there's like this thought process of, I'll just play something that's also pretty dubious, so then they don't know what to do, and you kind of enter the game.
Is there ever a sports correlation where the right approach is a dubious approach against the analytics? Would you ever be happy if they didn't go with your data-driven plan?
I think so, yeah. So we've had examples, and we've had to try and help our players where early in the game the other team has made, because we do have a randomness element. They've made several suboptimal shots, but because of it, our players will naturally be like, "We're getting killed. They keep doing this," and the coaches are saying like, "No. If they do that all game, we'll win. Just let it happen." But it's very hard for players when they see someone coming off, taking a guarded shot, and it keeps going in, and it's their guy shooting it and making it. It gets very hard for them to stick to the plan at that point.
Yeah, and I would just add on to that, I think it's all about equilibrium. Like in football, it might be correct to pass on a certain play, but if the defense is leaning 99% pass, then you have some edge on running. And so it's all dependent on what they're expecting.
On that, I always thought that optimal could be like, like on 3rd or 2nd and 8, maybe pass optimal is, almost always the case. but you should randomize your choice, like 80% pass, 20% run, so that, you know, they're always, to Ella's point, I'm just overstating it. I'm
No, it makes sense.
strenuously stating it.
I love when you do that. Back to you talked about how you felt like chess maybe could benefit from a little more chance, right? A little less of a clear known, you know, determined path, right? Robert sits in the chair of someone who's constantly trying to kind of do what Jennifer was talking about. Just because you know the engine move doesn't mean you understand the why, but there is always this element of the artificially intelligent evil engine overlords saying, no, this is the right answer, whether you believe it or not, right? As a commentator, switching a little bit from the game itself, but in terms of making the game relatable, dramatic, educational, what challenge has that been as someone who started doing commentary before the chess computers were really influencing what people think, like the eval bar we saw today, versus someone who now operates in the realm of having to translate and keep it interesting even though the computer thinks and is telling the world what the answer is?
Yeah, because I think what you're getting at is that sometimes the evaluation where you say white is completely winning or black is completely winning based on the number. But it could be the same number for two totally different types of positions, where one is a very straightforward path to victory and the other is like, if you don't make this move here, all other, as Ella was saying and Jennifer said before, like you're done. So I think the most important thing, because I know I will never be as good as the engine, is that you have to be willing to be wrong. Because most people are probably thinking about an incorrect move throughout the game, even the best players in the world. It's not like they just snap their fingers and they always are finding the best thing to do. They're thinking, they're using their wealth of experience to find the best possible answer to the puzzle that the position provides them.
But you may be willing to be wrong, but how would that relate to sports commentators if they're saying that Daryl's data is wrong and the team should do this?
They're just rarely right.
They're just rarely right. But sir, you obviously you're a big sports guy too. Like you do commentary for the biggest sport in the world, chess, more games played, and then you watch commentary for other
Is that true?
Yeah.
semi-popular sports.
Is chess number
There are
one?
15 million games played online every day. 19 million games played over
More
the.
than Candy Crush?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Good.
Anyway, you get it.
Yeah, I think there's a certain stubbornness that comes with being very good at, no matter the sport, the profession, but you have to be willing to, like I said, be willing to be wrong. And chess, it humbles you very quickly because you're wrong all the time. And even when you think, I just played this great game, I beat this super strong player, you throw that into the engine. It's like, yeah, so you made a mistake on move 16, move 20, your move 25 was actually terrible, but you thought you played a great, you have the instant feedback. So how do you translate it? You always want to be discussing, tangible nuggets of knowledge, right? Like if I'm going over a game, here's what you can take away yourself from this position and then apply it to your own games rather than just stating, this is winning for white. What does that tell you? Nothing. You can all see that yourselves and just putting on the engine. But that's not why people watch chess. That's not why people play chess. I mean, they want to win, but they also want to learn.
You watch a lot of chess.
I do.
You watch a lot of chess commentary. What do you think about that as a fan who watches the balance of what the computers are saying versus what an educator is saying, and how do you approach that?
Well, I like to get better, so I watch the ones like Robert. No, you don't need me to say great things. I watch the ones who try to instruct. You can tell there's quite a few that are just reading the engine. Really popular ones too that I don't feel like I learn a whole lot from when they're commentating. I'm not sure am I answering your question?
You are, and is that?
Okay.
I mean, is there a comparable to?
I
Sports?
would say when you walk through games, they're amazing, but you don't do it as much anymore. But when you'll pull out a game and you spend your time, like they're super instructional. You go down the different choices they could have made. That's how it should be. It's really not what makes people tune in, apparently, because no other sport, all the other.
That's what I was going to
analysts,
ask. Other analysts are not to.
They
whatever
actively
they're just
hate the sport.
They actively hate the sport, and they're calling what they see. Right?
Yeah.
Is it because the physical element is so much more visually understood that they didn't develop the same type of need to be educational in terms of here's why the pick and roll was effective? I know they do breakdowns, but it's not nearly the same as it is in chess, which is a constant breakdown of what you're seeing and why in terms of commentary.
They seem to be mostly annoyed they're not still playing.
But I think it's difficult, right? Because in chess, it's not easy, but it's explainable why the first few moves are made, what's happening beforehand, what's happening right now, where we're going to from here, because there's complete information. If some team makes a 3, I mean, maybe you have the answer to this, but then you'd win every single game. Like, what the exact right thing to do in response, I don't think that's abundantly clear, whereas we're talking about the engines and how they work in chess. You know what the right answer is supposed to be. And I think that gives you just a lot more to work with. So that's why you hear chess commentators talking nonstop for hours and hours, because there's always something to talk about that's relevant to the position or the game.
Back to Ella, because what you just said about knowing the right answer reminds me of something you said earlier, which is even though we know what the computers are doing, maybe humans shouldn't be trying to play as perfect as them, but just take the information and let it inform their decisions. You're working on all kinds of models in chess and other sports. What would you say about that as far as diving a little more into how you would approach, if you know what the win probability is, informing, spend a lot of time here or play really quickly even if it's a suboptimal move? How would you let the data, the engines inform your decisions going forward?
Yeah, so I think engines are useful in trying to arrive at precise values for whether it's time or decisions or sort of the other resources that you're managing in a chess game. So let's say that you have 10 minutes left and it's an end game, you have a critical decision to make. Just standard theory would say, oh, you shouldn't spend 9 minutes on this decision. You have a lot more moves to play. But if you have a precise understanding of the degree to which this move could swing the eval, then maybe it is worth it for you to spend 9 minutes on this game, and you have confidence that the remaining moves of the game following this will be sufficiently simple that you can execute them in 1 minute with no issue. And so understanding the value of time and trade-offs and putting your opponent in certain pressure situations is huge, I would say. Like, I think if you have an opponent under time pressure, for example, you might want to play differently than if they're not under time pressure. So you want to make moves that force your opponent to think. So if you want to trade pieces, maybe you'll put that off because it's easy for your opponent to just recapture a piece. They don't have to think at all. You probably want to keep pieces on the board, keep the position sufficiently complicated. So I think trying to use engines to arrive at values, whether it's ways that you can translate eval into time, into material, and kind of cross-communicating between those values is super valuable.
How much, from a practical perspective, when you're winning high-level chess tournaments, are you balancing exactly what Ella just talked about, right? The whole situation, not just the current position on the board, but the style of the player, how much time you have, how much time they have, and talk a little bit about that, if you would, in terms of critical moments where you're taking in more than just what's on the board to help make your decision.
Yeah, so when Ella was like talking about all these trade-offs and all these things, it just made me think about all the critical moments in a game, because a huge thing in chess is not just like figuring out the right move or right direction to go during a critical moment. It's recognizing that moment is a critical moment, because sometimes it's just like hard to see. Like every move, you have to spend like sufficient time to like know that you're not making a huge mistake here. Your opponent didn't just make a huge mistake, and then now you want to figure out like the plan. But how do you know that this moment is the right moment to spend that time on, whether it be 10 minutes, 20 minutes? Sometimes people spend even more, or if you should just spend like 2 minutes and just play something and go. So, like if you put it in an engine, it'd just be pretty obvious. Like maybe there'd be a huge like eval drop or rise, depending on that moment. And during a game, you just have to. It's honestly really hard to explain, because I think it's partially intuition. Something's not right in this position. Maybe like it's a pattern that just doesn't look quite right, or it looks like you just have a chance here to kind of change the direction of the play. Maybe like it was positional for most of the game, and now you have a chance to like start attacking and kind of change and create like some initiative. But yeah, once you kind of recognize it, then you have to like figure out like, like Ella said, if I should put the time in for this, and then maybe it'll just be easier after this. Or maybe it'll be the opposite. Maybe after this move, you're gonna have to continuously spend more time to kind of maintain the position.
I always know when it's a critical moment because I pay for the super platinum on chess.com, where it'll tell me black to move and win.
We didn't pay him
right
to
at
say
this
that, so.
right at this moment. Yeah. No, Robert always tells me this, that there's often positions that there is some key move, but they just pass through your game because you just didn't know. But if you play the puzzles on chess.com or wherever.
You don't have a bird on your shoulder tapping
Yeah,
you and
it's
saying,
just
"Hey,
like,
stop
hey,
right here, right
yeah,
now."
White's a move.
Yep.
You're gonna win in the next.
I-
yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, the psychology of doing puzzles versus playing is so different because when you sit me down and say, here, there's something here, right? That's why I give my students just positions rather than puzzles because they think, oh, I'm gonna sacrifice this. I'm like, nope, that doesn't work because none of the sacrifices work, but they think it does because they've trained.
No. The queen sacrifice always works.
Yeah, exactly. But
Is that comparable to like breaking down film? In the critical moment post game, it was obvious you should have done this, right? But in the real flow of the game, there's a different picture.
It's very similar in that, yeah, they'll always show the key moments the next day on film. But yeah, it's definitely not obvious that on this play, if you don't go for that loose ball, they're going to get it and they're going to kick it ahead, and then that's going to be a huge play.
But would you argue at the higher level in basketball, in addition to chess, there are more critical moments that are just less clearly defined? Because I feel that way in chess. Whereas you look at the best players in the world, and when you start at a lower level, okay, you've lost a piece, but you can still come back, right? The better you get, the less room there is for error. And so critical moments can be on move 10 in a perfectly neutral looking position, but it sets the tone of the game where you now may be on your back foot because you won't get the activity for your pieces that you would want. And that it's not a bad move. The engine won't even register as a bad move because it's a perfectly decent move, but the way the position ends up going is to your detriment. So if that happens a lot in high levels of chess, and I'm wondering, the higher level basketball.
Yeah, so it depends. I'll answer like Jennifer. So if the teams are evenly matched, then yes. And actually, it's one thing coaches get annoyed at me because we'll finish a game, lose by 1, and they'll be like, "We lost because we didn't do this, and then that happened." And I'm like, no. Every single play in the game mattered because we only lost by 1.
Yeah.
So the first quarter tie ball that we lost the jump ball, that's why we lost. So in the tech that the player got that we shouldn't have gotten.
Yeah.
So it's everything matters when it's close to your point. So every play becomes key at that point.
Great stuff. Sorry, I was lost in listening, enjoying it.
Yeah. I think we have questions from the audience too.
Oh, do we? Yeah, and I've got a couple more topics too. Do we have questions from the
I
audience?
just didn't want to forget the audience.
Yeah. No. Well, maybe. If you want to, go ahead. We'll pivot a little bit. Go ahead. Lower your mask so I can read your lips.
So, what are your opinions on more recently, chess players making most of their income from streaming? As sometimes players who are less talented can be making more money than players who have more talent.
What are our opinions on it?
Yeah, like as a GM.
I think it's awesome.
They're not asking me. They're asking you.
I think it's awesome. I think the question was.
Oh, I'm sorry. Good call. The question was, what do we think about the general direction of the game? Where with streaming, obviously content online being more accessible than ever, you have some of the biggest chess personalities, biggest chess influencers, biggest chess players in the world are no longer the best players. And what do we think about whether that's good for the game or not? And Robert said,
I said it's awesome. I think that chess is kind of rooted in a lot of tradition, and it's not always moving with the times, and people like to think of it as a pure meritocracy because over the board, the person who plays the better moves wins. But as it pertains to streaming and content creation, there's room for everybody. And people who are engaging, who really provide great entertainment value and also educational, hopefully it's edutainment, right? But they come from all sorts of backgrounds, so I love it.
I think it's just making chess catch up to everything else almost.
Yes.
Like esports, the top earners are streamers, the top NIL college athlete is not the best gymnast. It's you look at the end of the day, but before we're just about wins and losses, we're about entertainment generally in sports. And I think for chess, you would say it's really important that it allows more people to make a living.
It makes it more accessible too,
Yeah.
because chess is often seen as a game that people like. The amount of times you hear, "I'm not smart enough to do that," I always say that's not true. You just haven't either been taught in the right way, or you just have other things going on. Right, the best chess players in the world are exceptional at chess, and that's their focus. And I'm not saying that anyone can just go and play chess and be Magnus Carlsen, but there are all sorts of reasons, and so I think it makes chess much more accessible to the masses, and that is a very, very good thing, a la Queen's Gambit. Right?
Yeah, go ahead.
Say the best chess players.
I'll repeat it too, but go ahead.
Would you say the best chess players players to ever exist are the ones alive now, since computers help them like push their game to the next level.
What's your name?
Kobe.
Obi? We'll give you a
Next
diamond
question.
membership on chess.com for that. That literally was a question we're about to get into. So look at you, psychically aware of it, because a lot of people do want to have a conversation about that. The question was...
No one discusses the best players in other sports.
The question was the best... Summarizing who are the best chess players in the world. Are the current best chess players the best chess players of all time? The GOAT discussion, right? Which you really can't ever answer without a time machine as far as the people who want to dig their heels in, right? You hear it with Jordan and LeBron, and we'll talk up now with Magnus Carlsen and Bobby Fischer, the great American. The 50th anniversary of his match over Boris Spassky from 1972 is this year. Garry Kasparov, of course, very, very well known. I'm going to let the panel discuss it because we have questions here, and I'm going to preface it with, I think one of the interesting lens to consider this through is it more impressive to be dominant when everybody has these new resources and your separation is there, but the separation, is it there because you're just better at using the resources? Or is it more impressive to be dominant in an era when you didn't have the resources and you were just as dominant over the field before there was, I don't want to say performance-enhancing things, but there is a performance-enhancing discussion with Bonds' feats over Willie Mays and Babe Ruth when rules were broken, and I'm in no way comparing Barry Bonds to Magnus Carlsen, for anyone watching this on the internet. I'm comparing the records that were set in an era when a lot of people were found to have been using performance-assisting substances. What would you say about that as an outsider? We'll start with you, Daryl, not the chess player.
Oh, we should
Is
start with
Magnus
them.
the GOAT? Is Fischer the GOAT? And what do you think about the discussion of resources?
I'll answer quickly, but I'd rather have them jump
Okay,
in.
then Ella, we'll
Go
start with
ahead,
you.
yeah.
Yeah, so I think that you want to think about how many standard deviations away the best player is from the next best player. And to me, like, that's what's most impressive. I think you would expect every player to be using the resources of their time. So
When
I
you say
wouldn't-
standard deviation, sorry, just unpack that a little bit.
So there's some distribution of skill, like of ratings. Chess uses like ELO system, and that distribution has some mean and some variance. And so if
Is it
a player is
deviation?
significantly better than the next best player, then that player, I think that's more commendable than a player who is very close to the next best player.
Okay.
So who wins on that? I think that's probably Fischer, maybe.
There's a discussion to have, I think, about which standard deviation, which form of measurement is the most accurate to use, but I want to go to Jennifer. Go ahead.
Well, also, we were talking about resources, like what people have nowadays, like with the computers and like all the books, all the opening theory, compared to what they had before. But also something that also to mention is that like a lot of like the legends in chess, especially, they were the ones that came up with certain ideas that are so common now. Like I've seen so many like I'm not a huge person who studies classical games. I really should actually, but from what I've seen, like there's so many ideas in like Fischer games or even like Petrosian, Tal, like all of these like legendary moments in chess that have been shown throughout like decades. And if they were the ones that found these ideas like 50 years ago or however many years ago, if they had today's resources, like where could they be now? And also it's hard to say just because like our rating system has changed throughout the years. I think because people are higher rated now than they were 50 years ago. But is that because they're better or because just there's more people playing, so there's more people in the pool, so everyone's rating is just kind of inflated a little bit? It's all hard to say, so.
Great answer. Robert?
Yeah, I think we need to disentangle talent versus who's better. Because, Jose Raul Capablanca might have been the most talented chess player. I'm just using a former world champion from the early 1900s, right? Like, we don't know who's more talented. That's hard to quantify. But is he, if seeing his chess, as good as Magnus Carlsen? No. Now, separation between the best and the next best player is also difficult because Magnus keeps winning even though the players next to him are better than they have been in the past. Thanks to all the technology, all of the predecessors, like there's no debate that the players of today are better than players of the past. And how that goes into a conversation for the GOAT, it's not easy to say because Garry Kasparov was dominant like Bobby Fischer was dominant for a short period of time, but like was eviscerating grandmasters I mean, not just grandmasters, like the best of the best at a level that nobody has seen. When you 6-0 two top grandmasters in matches, it's unheard of, right? Going 11-0, not even a single draw in the U.S. Championship, never has happened besides him. That doesn't mean that Magnus Carlsen couldn't have done it back then, but it's hard to compare. And something that Ella was touching on earlier, if you just want to say who plays better because of their moves, well, we can't just take the objective like nature of the move, saying, oh, this was not the best move, because the practical elements are relevant. So, yeah, if you made me choose between Gary and Magnus, those are kind of my top two. I'm going to go with Magnus Carlsen, but I don't really care for these discussions too much because it just gets into like a chippy.
LeBron or Jordan?
LeBron, Jordan? LeBron.
Sorry, just had to do that. Daryl.
I mean, it's
Allen
it's
Iverson.
just
Allen Iverson.
Allen Iverson.
Dr. J. It's the same. I mean, look, the players now are so much better than even the 90s, and people want.
In the NBA, you're saying?
Yeah, just literally if you took, but we don't know what those players with Capablanca would have done if they were now with the knowledge of what three-pointers are worth and different ways to defend and the advantage of playing more aggressive defensive styles and things like that. So it's like an impossible thing to answer. But what's unquestionable that I get in trouble with saying is that the current players it's not even close. It'd be like Magnus for sure is the best player who's ever played chess. We don't know if you dropped Fischer, Kasparov, and Capablanca in our era now, who would be better.
Right. And is there an analytical comparison to the NBA too? The highest level of basketball is being played now, even if we don't know what other players.
It's not even remotely
Right.
close. And maybe that there's a chance that if we don't change our rules in the future, that the separation it'll still be better in the future. The separation got very large. Like the Golden State Warriors, run would easily beat the Bulls in the 90s. It wouldn't even be. They'd lose by 15. Not even close. So.
Does Jordan know that?
Don't ask him. He won't agree.
No, but anyway, great answers. Great question. Diamond membership coming your way, and I'll just finish off by saying that I also agree that Magnus Carlsen is the GOAT. I also agree that the highest level of chess is being played now at this time in history, regardless of the unanswerable time machine question. And we have actually done a lot. I believe there is an analytical answer in basketball. There's an analytical answer in chess. We have actually done a lot of research on this and compared the players against their best selves in an aggregated system, which has projected that the most accurate form of chess, if you say that Stockfish is God, the most accurate form of chess as far as what the potential sins would have been for mistakes now is being played at this time more than any other time in history. Players are better now, regardless of how they got there. So I'll back that up.
Who was the player that stood way out from the past when you guys looked?
It's a very good question. So there's actually an article. If you Google most accurate chess players or most accurate world chess champions in history, there's an article on chess.com about this. And a couple outliers were Magnus is the GOAT. Kramnik was actually second, which makes sense to a degree. He was right after Vichy. But then Fischer, was Fischer third ahead of Kasparov? Or no?
I don't like these articles.
Okay. It's a great article.
Not my thing.
So and I believe that even if Kasparov was next, Fischer was higher than we expected him to be, and there were some other earlier errors where players did stand out in a way that was interesting as far as their style at the time. So I'm told we have one more minute. I'm just gonna thank. Okay, we'll do one more quick question. Yeah, go ahead. Lower your mask. Oh.
Yeah, I mean, with the advent of machines, you talk about these players that like revolutionize the game at certain points with like different strategies or different ideas. Like, are we beyond like the next revolution in chess? Are we just trying to perfect what we already know, or is there a possibility that the game kind of fundamentally changes in its strategy or the way that it's played?
The question is whether we think the game is fundamentally changing because of the new way that the machine learning engines specifically, not just traditional engines, are. Yeah, and are we beyond any more changes of the influence of those? It's a very hard question. I'm told we do need to wrap up. That would be an amazing cliffhanger for next year. No, I'm kidding. I'll just say one of the fascinating things is the game is still not solved, right? And if you think about it, it is a game of defined information, no chance. There is no pocket cam. You didn't know this guy caught the jack on the river, even though you had pocket aces, right? It's fascinating when you consider that chess is still an unsolved puzzle and we can put people on the moon. So I will say that whether there's major breakthroughs coming as far as the approach and understanding, even the highest level of computing power hooked up to a jet engine and machine learning still hasn't solved the game. So I don't know that we can answer that. And either way, we'll say that chess is the biggest unsolved mystery on the internet, in the world. Never mind.
I would say one thing, it is hard to envision it changing much, but if you'd asked that question 8 years ago,
Right.
we would have said the same thing,
Exactly.
which is why when Alpha Zero came out, I literally spent weeks studying what they did because it was so groundbreaking and interesting. And maybe there's another one we can't know.
Yep.
You would love for chess 960.
And there's always Chess 960 if that happens. So, all right, I'm going to just thank real quick Ella Papanek, amazing, Jennifer Yu, Robert Hess, and Daryl Morey here with this Future of Chess panel. Thank you for being here, everybody.
Yeah, you crushed it, man. Loved it.
You crushed it. I don't know if my mic is still hot. If you weren't aware, there is an interactive chess hand and brain zone. What you saw here between our panelists is actually set up next door with computers where you can pair up with people and one of you can be the brain, the other person can be the hand. So if you're looking for some chess and interaction, head on over to that. It's a lot of fun. Thank you, everybody.